your own performance and hear the questions again, and
it's always a bit
good
confronting.
exercise.
Very confronting. Always, for everybody, I think. Well, for me.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm older than I thought I am. I'm not speaking as cleverly or as clearly as I thought I was.
There you go. All right, well, we have ticked over to 12:30 and we do have a full quorum. So welcome everybody. And in recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander spiritual connection to country, and in continuing ACE's commitment to reconciliation, it is customary to acknowledge country as we pass through. Today we acknowledge and pay our respects to the First Peoples, the traditional custodians of the lands and waterways. We thank them for their continued custodianship, and we acknowledge and celebrate the continuation of a living culture that has a unique role in this region and on all campuses of ACU. And today I'm on Camaragal lands. We also acknowledge elders past and present and thank them for their wisdom and guidance as we walk in their footsteps. So thank you and good afternoon everybody, and welcome to a confirmation of candidature presentation by Sam Hurley. And I'd just like to welcome his HDR supervisory panel, Associate Professor Baljinder Sadra and Principal Supervisor Professor Joseph Sirocci. And today's COC panel, the expert panel members are Associate Professor Keon Yap and Dr. Emma Bradshaw, led by the most competent Chair, Professor Herb Marsh. And so without any further ado, Sam, I'd like to hand over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Hi everyone, you're welcome to the presentation. Just before I start, I just wanted to thank Joseph and Baljinder for all the support and everyone for coming today. So my research is built around the key idea of the question of what drives well-being. It's been a question asked in the field of psychological science for decades, and as you can imagine, there's been lots of research conducted on exploring which factors influence our well-being. However, a dominant and highly cited theory in the field known as self-determination theory, developed from the 1970s, has provided an explanation for which key factors drive well-being. Now I'm going to move to my next slide. Here we are. So self-determination theory, or short for SDT, it's a theory of human motivation and personality. It's associated with the field of positive psychology, and it contends that these three basic needs, connection, competence, and autonomy, are paramount to one's hedonic well-being. So hedonic, that's more short-term pleasure in the moment, and then eudaimonic well-being, which is a broader satisfaction of one's life. And then for those three needs up here, connection, that's referring to a person's sense of belonging. Competence, it's the level of ability one has in tasks and hands. And then autonomy refers to the power to make decisions. And then as you can see down here, it's somewhat the opposite, although it has to involve an active rejection. So you can see that below thwarted need, they call it, refers to situations where a person's needs are actively blocked or rejected within a social environment. For example, when a need is thwarted, it contributes to ill-being rather than well-being. And SDT, the theory argues that someone with higher levels of these needs, they should experience enhanced well-being. And then more of it argues that these needs are universally important across context and time, and they serve as fundamental nutrients for optimal functioning and mental health. I wanted to talk about the organic assumption. So we know that from group level research that need satisfaction and need thwarting are linked to both hedonic and eudaimonic well-being and ill-being. And self-determination theory, it also argues that these needs are universal, meaning they apply to everyone. The issue is that psychology often assumes what we see at the group level also applies to the individual. This is the organic assumption. Psychology has a strong tradition of using nomothetic approaches. This is where we study groups, average the results, and then apply those averages back to the broader population. These findings shape our theories and even our clinical practice. And but the thing is, the averages can be misleading. They may not capture a broad trend and necessarily reflect what's happening for one person. And it's a bit of a one-size-fits-all approach, and it misses the complexity of human behavior. It does not align how psychology is. It's typically practiced in a clinical setting, which focuses on the individual in front of you. And we also know that effect sizes in intervention science have been flat or even declining over the past few decades, which highlights the limitations of relying on group or only averages. And take an example from SDT. If competence thwarting is associated with frustration at the group level, does that mean the same is true for every individual? And this is where, not necessarily for that, we would say, because applying that to the individual, you don't know if it'll hold true. And this is where you can use intensive longitudinal research becomes useful, because you can build a model for each person to see how their own needs relate to their own well-being. And you combine ideographic models, which focus on individuals, with nomothetic models, they call it, which look at broader trends. And then you can take an ideonomic approach, which is kind of hybrid between the two. We'll get more into that. And not only looks at estimated pool effects, but also quantifies heterogeneity. And this gives us a test to whether this ergodic assumption holds in the data. So I just wanted, before I go into the finer details of an ideonomic approach, just wanted to flag that there's been a wave of research happening at the moment, and there's been various papers, as you can see here, to see some examples of ones that have been conducted on this ideonomic idea. And I'll get to my next slide. Yep. So this is the ideonomic process in more detail, and got 4 key steps here. And so step 1 is this one here. Step 2, 3, 4. Step 1, you model the individual. Each person analyzed separately using their own repeated data. So you see, we start with the individual first and look at daily ratings of need, satisfaction, and well-being in our example. And you can use time series models, and there's a new thing called REMAX, and you can capture the lagged effects. Like, for example, you can look at where competence satisfaction yesterday, if that predicts today's mood. And this honors the idea that psychological processes don't just differ in levels across people, but also in how they unfold over time. Step 2, down here, meta-analyze the individuals. And so once we have models for each person, we can combine them through meta-analysis. It lets us ask whether relationships such as need, frustration, and lowers well-being are broadly consistent, or whether they vary substantially. And step 3, categorize heterogeneity. So here you dig a bit deeper into how people differ. For instance, one person they could be very sensitive to competence, frustration, showing sharp drops in well-being, while another may be less reactive. And instead of treating this as statistical noise like you commonly would, the ideonomic approach treats this heterogeneity is meaningful, consistent with SDT's theory that the needs are universal, but their impact is shaped by individual contexts. Now, step 4, identify subgroups. And finally, you look for recurring patterns if possible. And one way to do this is there's various clustering methods. One of them is GSOM, and growing self-organizing maps, it stands for. It's a machine learning approach that can detect natural groupings in data. And for example, one subgroup may show strong benefit from competence satisfaction. I call them, competence responders, and while another maybe they could be driven more by relatedness or connection. They use those terms interchangeably, relatedness and connection. And so when you identify the clusters, it can help, refine theory, open the door to more personalized interventions, show how for some people things can be a little bit different. And this method means that modeling at both the individual level and the group level captures each person's dynamics, and then the pulling results to test the general principles. Also, it does explore those meaningful differences and lets us evaluate the ergodic assumption, as we talked about before, whether average effects really apply to everyone or whether they follow distinct pathways. And I should note, though, as well, that this is a new and advanced method, and I don't fully know how to carry out every step yet, but I will try to learn and work with my supervisors to build these skills. And the important thing, I think, is understand the rationale and potential of this ideonomic approach, which combines the nomothetic and ideographic perspectives in a way that fits the questions I'm asking. Now, go to my next slide. So I'm planning to do 2 studies for my thesis, but the first, I'll start with study 1, which is a systematic review and meta-analysis. So there's been limited work of, went back there. Yeah, so there's been limited work of a review paper assessing longitudinal designs of the connection between these basic needs of frustration and its impact on well-being. But there has been some secondary research, for example, Van der Broek et al. And Tang et al. 2020, and they found that the basic needs are positively associated to well-being. However, this work only looked at cross-sectional design, so you can't infer causality from that. And there is a key paper, though, this 2021 Coxon one, that did look at the reviewed more of the intensive longitudinal designs, but the they could only accumulate a certain number. They got a decent amount of articles, but yeah, they didn't conduct a meta-analysis, and that was 4 years ago. So there's been a lot of new papers there, and looking at frustration of well-being. And also this was only in the work context, and so yeah, they did find significant variation within the work context of well-being. But yeah, given the absence of a comprehensive research synthesis, I think there's a significant opportunity to conduct a new review and meta-analysis that focuses on daily within-person associations between need satisfaction and well-being. And yeah, so ideally it would be a systematic review meta-analysis looking at those needs between and frustration upon well-being in experience sampling studies, and aim to conduct this. And so you do it in accordance with PRISMA guidelines. I might get a bit more into that in the next slide. And for this hypothesis where you're predicting that overall the daily satisfaction of these needs, so we talked before, autonomy, competence, relatedness overall will be positive related to well-being, and that the frustration will be associated with low well-being, but the associations are expected to emerge consistently at the within person level across studies using experience sampling methods. And it's also hypothesized that they will show significant heterogeneity across individuals, so that group level associations may not accurately reflect the experience of all people. So yeah, that's the main idea, is that ideally we'd be looking at, because that was just the work context, the Coxon one. So there's a lot of work, especially in the education field, like within schools and stuff. So I think that's a key, and then there might be some other areas as well, but I think that's a very big key one. And yeah, 4 years ago this was now as well. So ideally looking at more context, add a meta-analysis, and yes, like a bit newer with broader range of contexts. So here's the next slide. I showed you before briefly. Now, ideally be using PRISMA guidelines to conduct the design, reporting, make sure the review is rigorous and transparent. And I've met with the librarian, talked over the search terms, and plan to register it on Open Science Framework. And we've went through a bit of an inclusion criteria. So we want to look at studies that use these intensive longitudinal designs and things that where they're looking at within-person associations, and that could be something using something like multi-level modeling. Sure, it's got the right stats behind it. And then we want to assess, make sure it's looking at what I'm interested in, which is basic needs within SDT. And so either something like satisfaction, frustration, support, or thwarting, and something, yeah, we want it to look at well-being as well, or even, you know, we could broaden out as well. So which I have planned on, yeah, things looking at not just well-being, things like affect, mood, life satisfaction, vitality, or meaning, but they're all, you know, relatively similar concepts. And I only want to look at probably peer-reviewed studies, and then dissertations that we need the right information to extract within-person effects, or where data, we will need to get the data from the authors. And then exclusion is probably not too interested in looking at cross-sectional papers or studies with not that many measurements, like fewer than 5 measurements, or studies that only report behavioral cognitive outcomes without looking at psychological well-being. And we wouldn't want to look at something with, you know, just animals, unvalidated measures, or only group level data. And I'll probably exclude, yeah, preprints, opinion pieces, and other things like that as well. And planning to look at the databases, so PsycInfo, Web of Science, Scopus, Medline, and others covering both journal articles and dissertations. And after the search articles, plan to put them into coevidence, and then get rid of the duplicates and look at the titles and abstracts, screen them, get multiple reviewers in for that. And I'd like to make it blind, so yeah, there's less bias, so they don't know who said yes or no to a certain paper. And then eventually they will become aware of disagreement. And then if there is a disagreement, get some third party in to review, and then ideally extract the data, conduct a meta-analysis, and assess the quality using a Cochrane risk of bias tool. And that would allow me to not only estimate broad within effects, but also evaluate the strength and reliability of the available evidence. So I talked a bit about before about the databases I want to use, and then I've given an example here. So this is on my Scopus one. You know that, yeah, they do vary slightly, the terms, but that's pretty much the terms. And within each database, you have to put it in a bit different, and got about 407 total. I'm sure there'll be duplicates though there for some of those, but yeah, about 57 academic search complete, CINAHL 27, you can see in brackets there, 407 total. Next slide. So plan for study 2 is daily diary analysis of archival data, and looking at experience sampling methods of connection between daily needs and well-being. And the second study is already underway. So as I found with archival data, met with these original researchers, Adams and Weinstein, and they're fully on board with me. So yeah, it's basically one of these intensive longitudinal studies been mentioning of looking at connection between daily well-being, and I've contacted these researchers, and they would be happy for me to be a primary author. So get their data and then analyze it using this idionomic approach, because they've essentially just reported the pool effect. And so their data comes from a 21 daily diary study and focused on well-being, publicly available on Open Science Framework. And they had 178 English-speaking people, 95 women, 79 men, 1 non-binary, and 3 they didn't report the gender. And they're most people from the UK and the United States, and had an average age of 47 years. And they got their participants from prolific and compensated around £60 or 72, I think, US dollars, depending on the number of days completed. And so, yeah, to strengthen the analysis, I'm also interested in other data sets, other archival data sets that I would analyze, again, using this idionomic approach. And some other ones I have in the works as well. There's a guy from Germany contacted as well. And yeah, anything similar to this, so intensive longitudinal design, and that can help. We look at more data sets, get more insight and robustness, and participants that have looked at a very similar thing I'm interested in. So things with the daily satisfaction of well-being. And yeah, so this study I'm talking about, the one from the UK, the study produced 2,967 data points, and that exceeds the minimum recommended for mixed effects models with no prior effect size is known. And so that's showing we need a lot of data points, and that's very promising. That data set is essentially what I'm saying. And aim of this analysis is to determine how these needs impact well-being using this idionomic approach. And we'll look at this within person effects, and then carefully grouping participants into subgroups if relevant, and predicting for this one, for most individuals, each need will be positively associated with their well-being. However, the strength of these will vary across individuals and contexts. For example, autonomy may matter for one person, more competence or connection may be more central for another. And this approach captures individual variability and moves beyond the traditional one-size-fits-all model. So essentially just saying, yeah, they've got a lot of rich data here, but they kind of just stops that pooled effect. So it would be really interesting, I think, to look in more depth of those individuals and then profile them all and see how people vary. Now, I have a bit of a proposed structure. I've broken down chapter 1, 2, 3, 4 for the PhD, and appendices and references, and then each chapter 1 introduction, I'd break it down even more, like 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, and then for 2, 2.1, 2.2. Yeah, so for 1.1, I think the abstract, introduction, but then you probably get the main idea, general introduction, then that review paper, and then that daily diary study, which analyzes an archival data set, one or multiple, and then kind of grouping everything up together, speaking broadly about the implications and discussion of that. So move on next. So timeline. Here's a bit of an estimated timeline of the PhD, and understand it might be slightly subject to change, but here's a general idea. Focus mostly on this review, and that review can help, rationalize and justify the daily diary study, and then get these drafts done, and then ideally submit thesis submission here after final edits. I'm sure it'll go through a lot of edits, but likely to understand it, just as you predict for days and months, things can change, but we'll try to follow that timeline as much as I can. Now, I think that would conclude the presentation there. Do we have any questions? And yeah, thanks for listening for all that.
Well done, Sam. That was very good. I'd like to hand over to Herb as the chair to do the Q&A.
Okay. Let me start off with just a couple of broad questions. First of all, you're making an assumption that SDT says that the same component will be related to a given outcome for everybody. But if we take a generic outcome like life satisfaction, somebody who values their competence, the competence would be the highest path, and somebody else who values family life, that might be the more social side of it might be the strongest path. And I don't think that that would be inconsistent with SDT.
Okay, so are you, I don't know if I fully understand. So you're saying that for SCT is acknowledging that there is variability within their own needs. Is that essentially what you're saying?
Sure. Each person has a profile of needs.
Oh, right. I see. Yeah.
And I guess the issue is that it's not just, it doesn't say that one need will necessarily be the same for everybody, but I think it's not inconsistent with SDT to say that for person A, the competence path might be the most important to a generic outcome like well-being or life satisfaction or something like that, whereas for somebody else, it might be the need for relatedness.
Okay.
I guess one of the basic questions I have, and I'm happy for you to comment on. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah. Well, I think that from all the, I think from all the reading and everything I've understood, that I haven't seen too much about what you're talking about with that variance and stuff like that. But I think the main thing is that we are, still, I think we're looking at that there's more variability still than what they suggest, even though they might acknowledge some. It's that it still seems, from my understanding, to miss out on some people that are outliers in a way. Yeah, that
Sam,
is an interesting point, because
can I step in, Sam? I mean, I don't think you want to set this up as a test of STD, because don't forget we're measuring it in a specific context. I don't think anything we're doing is meant to challenge SDT. It's just trying to find a way to measure this for the potential for personalized interventions. So I don't think you want to fall in the trap of saying this is going to challenge STD's basic assumption that these are universal needs. That's a deep hole you'll fall into, and we're not doing that. I'm not sure how you test that, actually.
I think right.
Relevant to clarify in the thesis, and it's not to say that the individualized couldn't be consistent, but I'd say the individualized approach could be consistent with SDT, and so you don't want to put it up that way. Let me ask one other question. What are you going to be able to test with your meta-analysis in relation to your research questions and hypotheses?
Yeah, I think it's going to be able to look at the variability of, like, we can use people, the studies. I think it's similar to that idionomic approach. You can use and see the variance and get just more information of the main question of having is about these needs. So
my understanding of the meta-analysis is that it'll give you variation between studies, not between people.
Yeah. Okay. I was thinking,
and so that it really has. I mean, it's not that it isn't an interesting one, but I'm not sure how it applies to how you're going to get within-person variability out of a meta-analysis.
I think the main idea was that the study too is meant to justify. I think the study one, the review, is more the whole idea is more just sort of to get a stronger idea of what's out there, and then that can justify the study two of where we look in greater depth using that idionomic approach of the individual, and study two just kind of might just raise the question more broadly and get a more, as the name implies, a systematic review and meta-analysis. So you can just get that data, and then that study two will justify, and then we can look a lot deeper in the individual.
Well, I guess my sense is that the research hypotheses and research questions, as stated, don't really apply to the systematic review, and you probably need to have a quite separate set of research hypotheses for this for the systematic review than you do for study 2, that's okay.
Yeah. Okay,
Let me now turn it over to some of the panel members. So we start with let's see, Emma.
Thanks, Herb. And thanks, Sam. I enjoyed reading your document, and I'm excited about your research. I'm looking forward to following it over the next couple of years. My question is, I'm sort of zooming out, thinking bigger picture about the implications of your research if you find or don't find what you're looking for. Like, let's say that you find support for your hypotheses that relatedness is kind of pretty universally and equivalently important to people, or that competence varies in its benefit based on individual differences. Or what if you find that the main effect, the group effect, applies pretty equivalently to all individuals? I'm wondering what you tell people as a result of what you find. What are the conclusions? What recommendations do you make in either of those scenarios?
Yeah, I think that, well, if it's broad, I would say that for the person, that it almost seems like the traditional, well, I'm just thinking more, because this would relate to the I'm thinking mostly the therapy room or something. You could be more, you'd be like, okay, well, maybe the manuals have been following for a long time, a traditional cognitive behavior therapy manual. It's quite broad, and I feel like it puts people into a bit of a box and be like, oh, okay, well, maybe this is, this is quite universal for most people, that we will follow a standard protocol and this should be very applicable to you. But if there's a lot of variation, you might have to sort of rework and then use that person, view them maybe more as an expert, like more into their own experience, rather than say a standard treatment protocols, and just kind of acknowledge the individual more rather than say the textbook. That's the way I sort of see it as well, is that it's this is kind of trying to get away somewhat to that broad blanket conclusion, but maybe if it is showing very broad things and people are very similar, that we will kind of go through a standard protocol for most people, and then if not, we will keep it more to the individual.
Yes, sure. No, I think taking that individual approach makes sense, obviously, with the method that you're using. I'm mostly wondering if you want to start thinking about how to frame your implications in the event that you do find some of this variation. Like, it would suck if at the end you were saying X, Y, and Z don't need relatedness support, or these handful of people forget about supporting their competence, because all three of them are positively correlated at the group level. And I think you would probably find that if you choose not to emphasize one, the other will be prices paid in the others. So it's not even a criticism. It's more like something to begin thinking about in terms of how you frame the implications of your results, regardless of what you find. But thanks for today. I found it really interesting.
Yeah, thank you. Cheers. Do you want me to say anything? Is that?
Feel free
I was
to
just going to say
it.
that, we were, it was kind of similar to what we were talking about with Herb before, is that, I don't know whether I made it clear enough, but we weren't trying to say these three needs were just never important to anyone. We think they're still probably going to always be important. Like, a human is eventually, doesn't matter who you are, you're pretty much probably going to need connection, but we might just say, at this particular time, this one need is taking a bit more of, competence probably is a fair bit more important for you throughout this week or day or something like that. But
do you think the degree of need specific benefit or cost is going to vary by person?
I think so. We think everyone will need the needs eventually at a certain time, but one might be the weighting might slightly vary within the person at certain time periods. And
as Herb was saying, I think that is theoretically consistent. So I'm wondering that's the part that I would invite you to give some thought to, is what that really means in people's real lives and how you'll apply it.
Okay, it's a good point.
Thank you, Emma. Keon?
Sam, for your presentation. And my apologies, I'm kind of coming down with a covering from cold, so let me know if I'm too soft. It's a really good research idea, research program of research to pursue. You know, SDT is one of those theories that has seen so much. It's a very strong theory. Lots of replication. You know, we've had some replication crises in psychology, but SDT always stands up to scrutiny. I know I feel like we're being a bit pessimistic here to think that there may be some we're going to find this variability that we've seen in all the other idionomic studies. Maybe there won't be. I think we should keep our minds open here. Maybe for once we will find homogeneity. Who knows? I think we should keep our minds open. Let's see. One thing I've noticed about your program of research here is that you have proposed your lit review not to inform study 1, but together with study 2, but in concert with study 2. You've got this research idea, idionomic research approach, and it's almost like your lit review is in service of that to some extent. But at the same time, I'm wondering how you, the way you've structured your lit review hasn't been for that purpose. It seems like you've used your lit review in a more traditional sense of, I'm going to do a lit review to inform my next study. If you were to rejig that lit review to think about how your lit review could inform a study that you've already want to, how would you do that? What would you want to look at in your lit review?
Okay, so are you saying so? Sorry, could you just trying to understand, because I think at the moment the lit review is to justify the second paper, and you're saying, yeah, I'm doing that right, but are you saying if I'm not sure I understand.
Okay, I'm wondering if your lit review could provide you with more answers than you are looking for, because right now you are just looking at probably effect sizes. My sense is you're looking at effect sizes with that association. But would you be also, my recommendation might be for you to look at things like, what are the factors that you may have to look at in these studies that determine variability, if you do find variability? What are the measures that are being used right now in ESM research in this area? And how do you measure need satisfaction in this kind of ESM study? So sort of questions that go beyond just effect size, so that you would inform and create more sophistication in your next study.
Okay. Yeah, I think, I don't know if this is related at all, but in a way, it looks like, you're looking for more maybe explanations. We did, I don't know if the moderators is enough, but that we did try to say that in some scenarios that to help explain this, it could be moderator variables in a way. And that's something I do want to look into more, as the moderators. But I suppose I haven't really touched a lot on the DSM too much and things like that, but it could be worth probably looking at.
Having a look at the different contexts.
Other kind of manuals or areas in a way.
The other thing I want to find out is how much information do you have with regards to the archival data already?
Well, I've been sent the data set from the people already, so I've already got it. And I found it on an open science framework, and we got in contact, and they said, fully okay for you to use the data. And there's another researcher who this is a different data set, and they've got a lot of data points as well, and they haven't sent the data set, there's other people, but they're open, they said, to working with us.
That's great.
We've at least already got one data set, and that's really rich, that data. That's the 20-something daily diary study with all those time points.
I noticed in the title of that study, it says in social and solitude contexts. How are you going to integrate that into your design?
So I've thought, if because with the data set, they had this another paper as well. I was thinking either that's been a thought of mine, whether I should start, addressing my review to add in some, because they do have some extra variables that I'm not as interested in, but I'm thinking, maybe if I have the data, maybe we should look at that, or that's still, I think, a work in progress, and I'm still thinking about those other ideas, because they did look at some other factors and things like that, so I'm thinking about if I should, exclude some of them or add in, or so still kind of thinking about that.
All right. Yeah. All worth kind of delving into, so you get these specific hypotheses that you can test.
Yeah, because I would need to, because even though the plan wasn't to talk about some of that other stuff, the plan would, because I was thinking to stick to SDT, but I'm thinking, well, maybe if they have, other variables, maybe we should add in another kind of ideas to address those variables. Maybe I should just stick on the isolated question I've got at the moment and only extract that. But it's something I've got to think about.
All right. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing your studies, and it's definitely a research program that's much needed. So I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Keong. Herb, do you have any follow-up questions before I open it to the audience?
I think one of the concerns that I've had is you've made the traditional analysis as a straw person. I mean, multi-level analyses look at heterogeneity, and you can easily do a forest plot on individual heterogeneity, and traditional research often looks at moderators that will explain that heterogeneity. Now, I understand that the traditional approach is more looking for generalizability, whereas you're not. So there's certainly a difference, but in the focus. But the traditional multi-level model is able to do much of what you're wanting to be able to do, and in some cases more elegantly than what it is that you're talking about. And having to use a two-step approach with the analysis. So it's not that there's anything wrong with your approach, but I think you're demonizing the traditional multi-level approach to longitudinal data to too much of an extent. And there's some of the new approaches, DSIM, and some of these things, some of these approaches are looking at very much similar sorts of things. So I think you need to be a little broader in your us versus them kind of approach.
Okay, yeah, it's a good point, and for sure. And I think it was a good paper. I don't know if it was someone comparing multi-level modeling to idionomics. I could touch more on those points on the differences, and I don't know whether I've over-exaggerated or something, but that's good to note down.
So if it's okay for me to make a brief comment, I think one of the, sorry, I'm still recovering from flu. One of the issues with multi-level modeling is just by its own calculations, it shrinks the estimates that are at the extreme closer to the mean. And that's almost by design. And that can be a problem in some clinical context where the cases that are at the edges are different from the mean, not in just terms of the size of the effect, but also the sign. So if the average is, let's say, 0.2 or something, which is a positive, there could be real people at the other end who actually have a negative association, not just positive. So from a clinical standpoint, knowing that dramatic difference is actually quite crucial, because an intervention for those people that's informed by the mean is not only going to not work, but may actually be harmful. And so it's the key point is it's shrinkage. It's not that multi-level modeling is wrong. So setting it up as a straw man is probably a problem. I agree with Herb, but it's just that it doesn't necessarily suit the use case in many cases.
Okay. If I do a forest plot on based on individuals within my multi-level model,
I understand. I'm saying that those model implied individual slopes are shrunk to the mean.
They're shrunk to
saying.
they're
Shrunk to the aggregate.
Yep.
That's
okay. There's differences. All I'm saying is that it's not black and white as was presented, and it needs those nuances need to be discussed. Not maybe so much for the proposal, but certainly in the literature review and in the discussion.
Yeah.
Let me open it up for other people. Other questions? Let's see.
Well, that's it.
Yeah.
All right. So if there's nothing further ado,
let me ask you one more question. With a traditional confirmatory approach, they're looking at to what extent it provides a goodness of fit as to whether or not invariance holds. Now, invariance in your context is the group holds, and if the group explains the vast majority of the variance, then the group may be a good fit. And one of the things that'll be important for you to develop is some sort of goodness of fit to evaluate to the extent to which the group consensus holds.
Okay, yeah, for sure. I'll keep that and consider that definitely.
Another question I'd like to ask you, I just don't know enough. All models have measurement error, and in most models, the measurement error gets pushed down to variation between people. And so the question would be, to what extent can you separate variation among people from that's real and due to measurement error or random chance?
Yeah, I think I've been spending a while trying to understand that myself, like what the difference is. And I think since I'm still learning this idiomatic process, the nitty-gritty of determining what's random error and what's that, it's something I'm still trying to figure out myself. So it's a good point.
We've got two leading experts here, so maybe one of them would like to comment on that.
Yeah.
Joseph or Belgenda?
I'll say something briefly, and then Joseph can chime in. I think it's a great question. There's always error when we measure anything. But one of the points that we need to keep in mind is the way we characterize heterogeneity in the idiomatic method is it uses like a two-step process. So there's a standard error associated with an estimate for each person's within-person association. And that standard error goes into, along with the effect size, goes into a random effects meta-analysis. And in that random effect meta-analysis, we use different indices of heterogeneity, and I-square is one of them. Everyone here, I suppose, is familiar with I-square. And I-square, by definition, is actually an index of non-random heterogeneity. And in fact, if the noise in the data goes up, I-square will actually go down. So it's just the way the calculation, the formula of it works is that high I-square actually indicates non-random heterogeneity. So that's one way of directly computationally addressing it.
Just as an exercise, maybe not part of the thesis, it would be interesting to add some additional random noise to your data.
We have actually done that, and there is a simulation study currently under review in which we have varied a lot of conditions, including the degree of noise, degree of variation in autocorrelations for intensive within person data and under various conditions looking at I-square. And we saw exactly this in terms of the I-square itself. But there are other things that, other problems though, that those simulation studies help us address. But I can understand this point of heterogeneity being random noise and not really meaningful heterogeneity. But
no, I'm not claiming that. I'm not claiming that. All I'm saying is that it's a confounded combination of them. And I understand that having longitudinal data helps you unconfound that.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
And we're working, just to flag, I don't want to take too much of Sam's time, but we're also working on other indices, Herb. You would love it. One thing we find is some variables are equisyncratic. So the pooled effect is 0. And it's the kind of thing like, assertiveness has no link to well-being. And so that's an equisyncratic variable, because then it's like, oh, well, we shouldn't do assertiveness training because it's clearly not linked to well-being. But some variables, it's because at the individual level, there's negative and positive effects that cancel each other out. So we call that equisyncratic. And we're working on an index to test whether there's significantly more significant positive and negative relationships than would be expected by chance. So that's an example. We're definitely getting into that realm, Herb. Kind of similar to what you've done in terms of trying to break new ground, hopefully. Or it all might end up being, as Keong said, maybe it is just everybody needs competence, autonomy, and connection all the time, and probably, I don't know.
But the point that you're making is much more generic than focused on the SDT, and I'm sure there's lots of examples where it's relevant. Okay, I don't want to go too much off on a tangent, but Sam, you will have to address some of these issues in the thesis eventually.
Yeah, thank you. I've already running some notes, so I think it's good maybe to ease into the discussion of talking about like
great. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Any other questions from anybody else? Okay, so we'll go ahead and go into the panel and do discussion.
Yes, so thank you very much, Sam. Once again, I'd like the audience to thank Sam for his time today. And also, thank you very much, Sam. So Jess will be in touch after the panel's convened. So I'm just going to stop recording now and thank everybody for their time. Thank you, Sam.